Hello, friends. Welcome to the SCM Next Gen YouTube channel, where we learn supply chain management in simple and easy language.
So without any further delay, let's get started. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel, otherwise you might miss many important topics.
You know, there's this invisible network that basically runs our entire world, the supply chain. It's the incredibly complex journey pretty much everything takes to get to us. And when it breaks, well, we all feel it. So today, we're going to dive into 4 powerful strategies that companies are using to make sure that doesn't happen.
I mean, let's think back a couple of years. Empty shelves, shipping delays that went on forever, brand new cars just sitting in lots because they were missing a single computer chip. Remember that? It was crazy. That whole global mess wasn't just some inconvenience. It was a massive, system-wide wake-up call. It showed us just how fragile these systems really are, but it also kicked off a revolution in how companies think about them.
Okay, so before we jump into the strategies, let's make sure we're on the same page. When we say supply chain, we're not just talking about trucks and warehouses. It's everything. It's every single person, every factory, every ship, and every piece of data that's involved in getting a product from a raw material all the way into your hands. It's this gigantic, interconnected global web.
All right, first up, the never-ending quest for efficiency. We're going to look at how one huge U.S. food company took on a level of complexity in its global operations that is, frankly, almost impossible to imagine.
So, try to wrap your head around this. You're managing a company that sources thousands of different ingredients from practically every corner of the globe. How on earth do you know if you're getting the best price? How do you even spot a potential risk before it completely shuts down your production line? They quickly realized that looking at their own internal data just wasn't cutting it anymore. Their solution was actually pretty simple in concept, but absolutely massive in scale. They figured out they needed to stop looking inward and start looking outward. By tapping into global trade data, they could basically zoom out from their own little piece of the puzzle to see the entire world market.
And that wider view was, well, it's just staggering. They got access to a platform with over 1.8 billion transaction records. That represents almost half of all global trade. All of a sudden, it's like they could see the entire chessboard, not just their own pieces on it.
And all that data translated directly into power. I mean, they could see what their competitors were paying for the exact same ingredients. They could pinpoint new, cheaper suppliers they never knew existed, and they could walk into negotiations with some serious, undeniable leverage. It was a masterclass in using global data to get a real competitive edge.
Okay, so our second strategy moves us from the digital world to the physical one. What happens when your problem isn't a lack of information, but a gigantic, real-world flood of actual product? This is what you'd call a physical stress test.
A frozen produce company was facing what you might call a champagne problem, a totally record-breaking harvest. But that good news came with a huge challenge. Over 105 million pounds of produce was heading their way, and they had nowhere near enough cold storage to handle it. This wasn't a data problem. This was a space problem, a big one.
So their logistics partner, a company called Lineage, had to scramble. They basically cooked up this rapid response plan in just a few weeks. And they didn't just find some extra space. They built an entire, flexible network of warehouses and transportation that was designed from the ground up to absorb this massive temporary surge.
And the result was this 5-fold expansion of their physical footprint. They went from just 3 facilities to a network of 15. Now, this wasn't just about adding warehouses. It was about building a system that could bend and flex when needed. It turned what could have been a total crisis into a season of record growth. Now that is scalability in action.
Okay, our third strategy is all about shifting from reacting to problems to proactively preparing for them. I mean, how do you build resilience for a future you literally can't predict?
We all remember the global microchip shortage, right? Well, for one major tech company, they saw the writing on the wall. A single missing component could cost them hundreds of millions of dollars in lost sales. They needed a way to stress test their entire system before a real-world crisis did it for them.
The solution was to build something called a digital twin. Think of it like a flight simulator for a supply chain. It's a complete virtual replica of their entire global network. They could throw all sorts of virtual disasters at it, port closures, supplier bankruptcies, trade wars, you name it, and see what would break, all without risking a single real-world dollar.
And the result? It was incredible. In just 6 months, by using this digital twin to find all their weak spots and create backup plans, they reduced their revenue at risk by several $100 million. They basically built a stronger, more resilient system by breaking a virtual one over and over and over again.
So for our final strategy, we're going to zoom in from these massive complex systems all the way down to the human element. Because at the end of the day, all these strategies come down to people making some really difficult decisions.
So this drinkware company, Simple Modern, had actually moved its manufacturing from China to the US to get away from all that pandemic shipping chaos. But now, a new problem was popping up. US production was getting really expensive. And suddenly, they found themselves at a crossroads, asking a huge question. Should we go back?
And here is the core of their dilemma. Manufacturing in the USA gave them more control, more flexibility, and stable shipping costs. But manufacturing in China offered way lower production costs. It was this classic trade-off between risk and reward, and there was no easy, mathematically perfect answer.
So this is where it gets personal. What would you prioritize? Do you stick with the control and stability, even if it costs more, or do you go for the lower costs and just accept the higher risk? This is the kind of strategic decision that leaders are wrestling with every single day.
So let's bring it all together. What we've seen are really 4 pillars of a modern, strong supply chain. There's the data-driven efficiency of that food company, the physical scalability they needed to meet that huge surge, the digital resilience built by the tech firm, and finally, the crucial, human-led strategy you need to navigate the whole thing.
Which leaves us with a final thought. In an increasingly unpredictable world, maybe the goal isn't to build a supply chain that's unbreakable, but one that's built to bend without breaking. It forces us to ask a really fundamental question. What's more valuable, a perfect plan or the ability to adapt when that plan inevitably falls apart? Thanks for tuning in.